give a very, very brief overview of Nero and Suetonius, and really just the idea of the emperor and what that means. You'll see on the screen this is a list of the Roman emperors from the beginning of Augustus to the end of Justinian. This is actually not even a complete list because in the areas around here that I'm circling and here, there were actually so many men who were very briefly crowned emperor, so much infighting that you could probably add about 100 names to this list of people who at one point or another had followers believe that they were emperor. But let's start at the beginning here, because this is where we are. You'll remember that Augustus set the tone. Look at that. He was very smart, didn't die for 41 years after kind of taking control. And by the time he dies, the idea of one man being in charge, dominating the Senate, was pretty common, or was now the new norm. So when Tiberius took over, he took over at a time where the idea of one man ruling was now something that was almost expected. This whole group, from Augustus down to Nero, this whole group of emperors come from one family called the Julio-Claudians. Yeah, it's related to the families of Julius Caesar. So, like a monarchy, the emperor would have a relative. It was rarely a child in this case, because they just didn't have them that were able to, but they would have a relative take over and rule. What's interesting about the people that followed Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, and Nero in particular, Claudius to a lesser extent, is that these men were more noted for their, let's just say, moral deficiencies than they were for any kind of noble leadership. And yet, during their reigns, the empire ran and flourished, right? So there's something now about the way the empire is being run that even if you have someone in charge that is not the type of leader you would typically want, the empire is still able to flourish. And I'm curious what that says about the empire and how it's set up, and how Augustus really set this up. It's not to say that the emperor doesn't have any effect, because as we will see, when good emperors are on the throne, really good things happen. When bad emperors are there are definitely some problems. And Nero will be one of those examples. After Nero commits suicide, and I believe he was 31 years old at the time when he committed suicide, so it'll tell you the pressures he felt, there's a struggle for the throne to be the next emperor, because he doesn't have a necessarily an obvious choice. His choice is Galba. But you'll see, in 1 year, 4 different emperors come to the throne, and they fight for that power until Vespasian sets up another dynasty, the Flavians. And the Flavians only last from Vespasian and his 2 children, Titus and Domitian. Some of you will learn a great deal about Titus and Domitian for your Roman project, especially if you were doing anything with the treatment of Jews and Christians within the empire. Those 2 are very famous for how they treated in not such a good way. And after Domitian, we have a kind of change in policy, and we're going to learn a little bit more about that later, where the emperor then, instead of choosing his own child, adopts someone who they believe is the most worthy successor. And we have this series of 5 good emperors, they're called, good name, where they are adopted. Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius we're going to read a great deal about. So anyhow, basically what I want you to see is just how this kind of works and how they've worked themselves into a monarchy. So Nero himself, he actually comes to the throne when his, I think it's his uncle or great uncle, Claudius, probably murdered, probably by Nero's mother. Yeah, this is all fun stuff. Um, Comes to the throne when he is only 17 years old, and his mom Agrippina really wants to be in charge, wants to dominate herself, and she and Nero clash over and over again. So much so that he tries to kill her on multiple occasions. So this is the kind of world in which you're going to be reading, right? So let's talk a little bit about who Suetonius is then, and so you can get a sense of what he's trying to do. So Suetonius lives at the time of Hadrian. See him down here? So he is actually born around 69, I believe, so right around the time of Nero's death. But he is writing at the time of Hadrian, looking back at the first 12 emperors of Rome. And so he writes biographies. And he doesn't write biographies the way you kind of traditionally would expect with, all chronological order. He has thematic orders. And whoops, I probably should have done my whole screen, but I didn't. So I'll tell you a little bit about what he did. He wrote about, the lives of the emperors based primarily on histories that have already been written, little histories. So he does get some of the kind of details of what went well and what didn't. But he also does a great deal of his writing based on gossip that has been heard over the years about the emperors. And so what you get is a pretty racy, almost, like soap opera style biography. So as you read, you're gonna read some things and go, "Holy cow, is this true?" And the answer is maybe. One of the issues we have is we don't have a great deal of primary source material about these emperors. Suetonius is one of the few that survives, and we know that Suetonius has a tendency to listen to anecdotal evidence and hearsay and gossip. So we have to read this with a grain of salt and try to figure out, okay, so if this is all the gossip that's going on, what does this say about this emperor? How did the people view this emperor? What can we assume is true? And then can we go through this and figure out, are there details about the emperor's actual reign of the empire that help us understand what was happening during the time? I think Suetonius is an interesting, sometimes even a fun read. So I'm hopeful you'll enjoy that portion of it. But also I want you to make sure that you don't come out of this thinking that, okay, well, if Suetonius said it, then by definition it is true. Think about how, as an historian, you might figure out if this was true, right? You might have to find other historians who wrote about this. And there are not a lot there. A lot of later historians will actually grab what Suetonius wrote and put it in their histories as if it's fact, right? And so you end up with some real problems in terms of accuracy. So this is just one of the challenges we have learning about the ancient world. But I think you will, for lack of a better word, enjoy reading Suetonius. I think that you'll find that there's enough there to kind of keep you entertained. He has some famous ones too. We didn't read Caligula. Caligula he makes Nero look downright okay in the head. There's a great line in Caligula where Suetonius has written all of the things about his life, about his politics, about his family, about the things he's done, his administration, his taxes, and all that stuff. And then about halfway through, he has a line that says, "So much about the man, now we must discuss the monster." And for the second half of the entire portion on Caligula, it's just bad, really kind of disgusting stories about Caligula. I'm curious if you see something like that in Nero. Is there a part where he decides, okay, I've done the stuff that I need to tell you about his administration. Let me tell you the crazy, wacky stories that I've heard. If you see that, note it. That's all I have for today. I hope this helps you a little bit in your understanding and your reading of it. And again, please send me emails, ask me questions. A lot of you have been doing that. I hope they've been helpful. Good luck. We'll talk soon.